Watch how this rainy countryside scene comes to life with just a few soft washes and layered greens. One of my favorite things about watercolor is how perfectly it captures that quiet, misty atmosphere. So grab your paints, settle in, and let's paint this together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rachel, owner of Highlands Artistry. Today we're painting the soft, rainy farmland scene with rolling hills and misty layers in the distance. This is such a relaxing paint with me style tutorial, so grab your watercolors and let's get started. If you'd like the full list of supplies I'm using, I'll have everything linked down in the description box below. First, I'm wetting both my watercolor palette and my paper with clean water. I'm using a watercolor block, which means the edges are already glued down, so I don't have to worry about the paper warping with all of this moisture. Using a large brush, I'm spreading that water evenly across the surface before going in with our first color, a soft gray. As I drop the pigment onto the paper, you can watch it naturally travel downward as I tilt that block. This movement creates that beautiful rainy atmosphere and helps mimic the look of falling rain. I'll pick up a little more pigment and deepen the horizon line, allowing it to softly blur into the sky above. Then I'm mixing a touch of green into that gray and dropping it right over the top to begin building those distant landscape tones. Going back into the sky with a more concentrated gray pigment, I'm creating the look of heavier rain clouds gathering in the distance. Then I'll bounce back down into the foreground, continuing to layer in more color and depth. Next, I'm adding yellow ochre into the foreground field and allowing that edge to softly blend into the tree line behind it. I really love letting watercolor do the work here and watching those colors naturally bleed together. Now I'm reaching for a smaller brush and mixing yellow ochre into my green mixture. I'm lightly dropping that along the top of the tree lines to create some variation and warmth. I'll also bring some of that color into the foremost tree line to help pull it forward in the scene. From here, I'll continue going back and forth between lighter green, yellow-green highlights and darker green mixtures to create shadows and depth throughout the tree line. Switching back to my larger brush, I'm making sure it's clean and only slightly damp so I can gently lift some pigment away along that edge between the field and the trees. This helps soften that transition even more. Using the wet on wet technique again, I'm adding more yellow ochre into the field to create extra movement and variation in the grasses. At this point, I'm going to let the paper dry completely before moving into the next layer. Once everything is dry, I'm going back in with clean water over the existing tree line so I can maintain that soft, blurred effect while adding more depth and pigment. This green mixture has a few brown tones added into it, which gives the trees a much moodier and earthy feel that works really well for this rainy landscape. I'll dance different values and mixtures of color into the wet wash to create beautiful variation throughout the tree line and keep the painting feeling loose and organic. Now picking up a bit of that lemon yellow color and mixing it in with the green, and I will be adding that to the foremost row of trees or shrubbery. This will help add a punch of color and also bring that tree line into the foreground a little bit more. Mixing some darker brown into that yellow ochre color for that foreground field and pulling that line of water down to make that blurry effect. Now I'm just taking a damp brush with no pigment on it and trying to scrub out that little mistake in the clouds and then blur out those edges. Once again, I'm going to let that paper dry completely before starting the next layer. Next, I'm using a brown watercolor pencil to lightly sketch in where I want my grain silo to sit in the composition. Then I'll grab a brown-gray mixture and begin laying that in as the base color for the silo. Next up, I am going in with white gouache and laying in that top rounded dome to the silo. Then also going in and adding some details such as the ladder and some weathered paint on the side of the silo with that same white gouache. It's easy to add depth and variation during this step by adding in different mixtures of gray and brown into the mix to lay in some shadow. The last little portion of this video did not record, unfortunately, but I will talk you through some of the other steps that I did. On the right hand side, there is a cluster of trees, and I just ended up taking a brush of clean water and kind of scrubbing the paper, lifting out some highlights in that shrubbery, and then going back in with a darker green mixture and adding some shadows to that same shrubbery to pull it more into the foreground. I then went and I took a very light wash of a gray color and I added in some tree details to the left of the grain silo. And then I also took my large watercolor brush with that same gray mixture, extremely watered down, and I did a dry brush texture over the grain field in the front, which you will see all three of those details in the final shot, which is coming up very shortly. And that finishes up our rainy farmland watercolor painting. I love how soft and atmospheric this one turned out. The blurred tree lines, muted colors, and rainy textures make this such a peaceful scene to paint. If you followed along with me today, I'd love to hear how your painting turned out down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss future watercolor tutorials, plein air adventures, and cozy paint with me videos here on this channel. Thank you so much for painting with me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay creative, stay faithful, and stay rooted in grace. Bye, guys.